KDK Television. And our guest this morning is Mike Mickes, a Democratic strategist here in Pennsylvania, and somebody who's been involved in a gazillion campaigns. Mike, nice to be with you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
So let me ask you about this. It almost seemed like a bit of one-upsmanship, where first Vice President Pence announces he's coming to Pittsburgh, to Greensburg actually, on Thursday. And then we hear over the weekend that Dr. Jill Biden is going to do a virtual visit to Pittsburgh on Tuesday. And now Mrs. Pence is coming to Pittsburgh on Wednesday. What's going on here?
Well, Pennsylvania is incredibly important for this election in November. It's ground zero. Joe Biden cannot win the presidency without Pennsylvania. And some people would argue that Donald Trump can't win re-election without Pennsylvania. And within Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania is critical. Hillary Clinton lost the counties outside of Allegheny County by a wide margin in 2016. And if that repeats itself, Donald Trump's going to win Pennsylvania and most likely win re-election. So both campaigns understand how critical it is. You know, in the counties outside of Allegheny County, Joe Biden needs to improve on Hillary Clinton's numbers from 2016. He may not need to win those counties, but he has to do better. And then he also has to run up a wide margin here in Allegheny County.
You know, some of the polls suggest, Mike, that Biden is well ahead, although oftentimes it's registered voters, not likely voters. But is this state still up for grabs?
I think it is. Look, I believe Joe Biden right now, today, has a pretty comfortable lead here in the state of Pennsylvania and nationally. However, the election's not today. And I expect those numbers to close a bit as people return back to their partisan camps. But I think Joe Biden is in a very good position right now. And Donald Trump's going to have to do something pretty dramatic to reverse these numbers right now.
So is that why the vice president is coming to Greensburg on Thursday, and Mrs. Pence is making her own separate visit to the VA on Wednesday?
There's no doubt that they are coming to Pennsylvania because they know they need to improve on the numbers. And, you know, the vice president and the second lady coming here demonstrates they realized how important Pennsylvania is, but more importantly for our interests here in Western Pennsylvania, they need to run up big numbers outside of Allegheny County.
So let me ask you, what are the demographics that are at stake here? Because we often say that it's African Americans, it's suburban women, and it's white working class males. We got them all here in Pittsburgh.
Well, and another thing that another group that is really important right now is seniors. We have an older population. All the polling I've seen, both here in Pennsylvania and nationally, Donald Trump is right now, and I stress right now, doing much worse among seniors than he did in 2016. And for him to win, he's going to have to bring them back in the fold.
How do you think the candidates stand among the other groups I mentioned?
Well, look, I think Joe Biden will win the African American population by a very wide margin. What his campaign needs to do is focus on turning them out. And it's very important for him to win. He needs to turn out African American voters. Suburban women is critical to the Joe Biden coalition, and he's going to have to keep fighting for them. Donald Trump has started to try and make some moves to try and peel some votes off in the suburbs and in suburban Pittsburgh. It's incredibly important for Joe Biden to do well in Wexford and Bethel Park and Upper St. Clair and communities like that in the suburbs. So that is, in a nutshell, what Joe Biden needs to win this race, coupled with, overperforming with seniors in relative to what Hillary Clinton did in 2016.
But Mike, what about the white working class males in Westmoreland, Washington, Beaver County that overwhelmingly, seemingly supported Donald Trump in 2016? How important does Joe Biden have a shot with those folks?
I don't think Joe Biden can win that subgroup of voters, but if he can improve on it, I mean, Donald Trump won the state of Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes. And any vote he loses endangers his reelection prospects. So if Joe Biden is even able to do marginally better than Hillary Clinton with white male voters, I think Donald Trump's going to be in for a long night on election night.
Now, do you think it makes a difference that Dr. Jill Biden is visiting Pittsburgh virtually with Senator Casey and with the head of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers, whereas the Pences are actually physically showing up?
Look, I think it cuts both ways. Obviously, traditionally we're used to seeing big rallies or big press events, and that's just not happening. I don't think it's much of a difference because in the end, most voters are going to see the news and they'll see that Dr. Joe Biden was here talking about whatever issue. It sounds like she'll be talking about education if she's with the head of the Pittsburgh Federation of Teachers. So the news coverage will be the same. I think it sends a message to people who are concerned about the virus that they're taking it seriously, whereas one of the knocks against Trump and Vice President Pence is they're not taking the virus seriously. And so I think it ends up being a push, but in the end, if there is any downside to it, I think the downside would be coming in person.
You really think that? You think showing up in person is more of a negative than actually doing a virtual visit?
Like I said, I think it's a push, but I do think there are people who will look at this and say, why are they doing this? They're putting people at risk, interacting with people. The big question mark. I mean, from what I've heard and seen, Vice President Pence actually is willing to wear a mask from time to time. So it may negate that any potential negative. But look, I think in the end, the average voter gets their information from watching the news, reading the newspaper, and there won't be much of a difference between being here in person or doing it virtually.
And then finally, let me ask you about the issue, because the vice president is coming here to promote support for local police, coupled with the president's law and order tweets all the time. I mean, is this really a calculated effort to win suburban women?
I think they think it's a calculated effort to win suburban women. I don't think it's gonna work. I think they need to focus on other issues if they're going to win these women back. I think, by and large, the public knows that Democrats are not anti-police. They do believe there need to be reforms. And I just think this is Donald Trump running the campaign rather than strategists who actually know what wins votes.
And Dr. Biden, of course, who is a teacher, an educator, is coming here to talk about how you properly reopen schools. Is that a winning issue?
I think it is. I think people would love for their children to go back to school, but they have deep concerns with the spread of the virus, especially here in Allegheny County in Western Pennsylvania, where we've seen a rise in numbers. People want their kids to go to school, but they want them to be safe. And I think focusing on that is critically important. And I think it is a winning issue for Joe Biden.
So in the end, Mr. Meckes, I know we're still 99 days from the election day. And of course, actually in Pennsylvania, you'll be able to vote a little sooner than that by mail. A prediction? Is it too early to ask you for a prediction?
It's too early. Right now, I think Donald Trump is approaching the point of no return where he may not be able to come back. I don't think we're there yet. But right now, if the election were today, Joe Biden would be our next president. But the election's not today, and it's going to be incumbent upon Joe Biden turning out African-American voters and suburban women and doing well with seniors and improving on numbers in some of the more rural counties.
And do you believe that these candidates, this week seems a little top heavy with candidates coming in and their spouses. Do you expect to have a lot more of this in the weeks ahead?
I wholeheartedly expect a lot of attention to be focused on Western Pennsylvania. We are going to see the candidates, whether it's virtually or in person. We're going to see top surrogates, spouses. Western Pennsylvania is just incredibly important to both campaigns. So we're going to get a lot of attention between now and November 3rd.
Our guest this morning is Mike Devaney, the Republican strategist here in Pennsylvania. Mike, always good to be with you. Thank you, sir, for being with me.
Thanks, Sean. Glad to be with you.
So let me ask you, these candidates are coming to Pittsburgh right and left this week. We have the vice president coming to Greensburg on Thursday, his wife coming to Pittsburgh on Wednesday, and a virtual visit by Dr. Jill Biden on Tuesday. What's going on here?
Well, without a doubt, Western Pennsylvania is ground zero for the 2020 presidential election. It's an area where President Trump 4 years ago was able to get a lot of Democratic votes. Joe Biden knows he needs to be able to steal those back. And so I think this is a precursor of what we're going to see over these closing 4 months of this presidential race.
Do you think that this state is up for grabs right now, despite some polls that we've seen?
And currently, the polls show Joe Biden with a sizable lead over President Trump. Many of us, including me 4 years ago, felt that the polls that had Hillary Clinton up were going to be determinant as well. But as we know from 4 years ago, polls don't always dictate the outcome. As President Trump was able to win this state as a Republican for the first time since 1988, the Republican was able to win this state. So there's still a lot of time between now until then. I do think right now Joe Biden is ahead, but these type of visits where, this type of campaign is exactly what both candidates are going to try to do to sway votes. And there are few undecideds, but this is also about rallying the base as well.
Yeah, that was my next question, Mike, was what are the most significant voters for the Trump-Pence ticket in Pennsylvania?
Well, I think if you look at where they go, look at the calendar, going to Westmoreland County, going to Greensburg, that is a Republican base. That is an area where President Trump had huge margins against Hillary Clinton. So I think you really see him there making sure that people don't discount this race, making sure that Republicans go out there and disaffected Democrats go out and get to the polls for him. But I think what the difference between this year and last year is Hillary Clinton really focused solely on urban areas. And that was one of the critiques of her campaign. And that was one of the things that the Republicans were able to capitalize on, getting really significant margins in areas like Greene County, Fayette County, Beaver County, areas that have Democratic voter registrations, but yet delivered very large margins of President Trump. It remains to be seen if the Biden campaign is going to repeat that mistake.
Yeah, well, they say they're not, but we'll see, I guess. How important are the suburban women in Pennsylvania?
Look, so suburban voters are always swing voters that are going to be important to either candidate. Right now, if you believe the polls, Joe Biden has a significant lead. In particular, suburban women, even Republican women, become a key demographic that both campaigns are going to be talking to. If you look at the polls, President Trump right now is struggling with the more affluent areas. So if you're higher educated, higher income areas, those are areas that have been problematic for the president. But he's really outperformed at the opposite end of the spectrum with lower income, lower education levels. So this is a critical component. Republicans can't win if they don't get suburban votes. It's an area that they're going to have to improve upon.
And what about African American and other people of color? Is that as important to Republicans as it is to the Democrats?
Well, the African American voters are a very critically important base to the Democratic Party. When African Americans vote in large numbers, it obviously benefits the Democratic candidates. They're largely registered Democrats, and so intensity is what you look for amongst various coalitions. And Joe Biden is going to need to get a big turnout amongst the African American community if he wants to win in Pennsylvania.
And then finally, Mike, we've got 14 weeks to go. I would expect that we're going to see a lot of these candidates over the next few weeks. I'm certainly up until Election Day. Until one of them says they can't win the state, they're going to be here, right?
Well, I think we're going to follow the spending on television, like your stations and others, as these campaign ads continue to hit the airwaves. That's one telltale sign that this is a competitive state. The other thing is going to be the continued visits between the actual candidates, their spouses, their surrogates. I don't think we're going to be at a loss for people campaigning over these last remaining weeks.
Well, Republican strategist Mike Devaney, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. Happy to do it.
You know when you have that feeling when you see something from the past.
The past is the past.